got another video for you today, and I hope you like that new intro, and there's a new end screen towards the end of this video. You can leave a comment what you thought of it. This is the continuation of the updated in-depth guide series. We're on to munitions, and as per usual in the comment section you're going to find a pinned comment that'll have each section of this video and be able to skip to a timestamped. So if you want to just look at the melee for might or melee for prec, range rotations, single target rotations, the controller rotation, all of them are going to be timestamps in that pinned comment, as well as I'll link the previous guide for munitions that I did back in 2018 that has a little bit more insight to some of the powers, even though the rotations are going to be different. So this guide is going to have just the updated rotations and loadouts and tips and tricks. I'm not going to be doing any raid footage, and trying to keep these video series towards like 30 minutes, like 15 minutes for prec, 50 minutes for might. That's the goal. So if you have any comments or questions, put them in the comment section below. Let's get into it. Okay, so in terms of the spec for munitions, it's going to be the same as the previous guide. Unfortunately, I am under geared as of this DLC so far. I wish I was a bit higher geared. Just constraints in my personal life and with work didn't allow me to play as often as I could. So I'm sitting at just basically, vendor gear or the quirk vendor gear. So I do apologize for that. I would like to have full elite set and full gear when I do these guides, just so you can see what the maximum potential is. But nonetheless, we'll have to do with what we have. So in terms of the gear, it's still going to be blast adapter in the weapon. Head mod is going to be either Neo Venom Boost or Big Gun, depending what you're using. Neck mod is always going to be Escalating Might. Back mod, Accelerated Mini Nuke. Chest mod is going to be Core Strength. Leg mod doesn't matter. You can use Restorative Chains on, but this restorative leg mods don't scale as well whatsoever anymore. So the heals are literally nothing. Head mod, this is going to be a choice. And depends on what content you're running. So you're going to want to take a bunch of hand boxes because it's going to change. If you're running solo content or duo content, even the alert content, anything without a tank, you're going to need empower channeling, because there's way too many channels on munitions. You're going to get lunged by ads continually. Your damage is going to get cut off by chain gun. You're going to lose not only damage, but you're going to lose rotation time because then the cooldowns won't line up. So in any content you're running without a tank, you need empower channeling. And even though, solar amplifier, if that was at 200, that only counts for heat vision. So just having empower channel, if you have solar amplifier 200, that doesn't count towards all the other powers. That's just heat vision. But it's just, if you try to do like any of the alerts as munitions, you're just going to get farmed for counters, which is frustrating. So have empower channeling, anything for raids or with you have a tank, then take max damage. So you don't need this for raids because you're not going to be getting lunged by any ads because you have a tank. So if you don't have a tank, empower channeling in any content. If you do have a tank, then max damage. Foot mod, Tumbling Master is fine. In terms of trinkets, once again, your choice. Shadow Bat, there's the Sunken Rune, which will be for melee damage. Completely your personal choice. You're going to want the DPS trinket, Supply Drop Orbital. In terms of artifacts, for this melee loadout, ideally you want to have the Gemini, the Grim. The Grim is very nice for munitions as well because it sets up the burning PI. Yes, there's powers like Flat Cannon and Shrapnel Grenade Launcher that'll do that for munitions, but ideally you want the Grim because it allows you to save using that power, which is going to be weaker. Shrapnel and Flak obviously do a lot less damage, and you can jump right into a rotation like with Mini Nuke or with Chain Gun that'll be doing higher damage. So basically you run the Grim to set the PI to save you from having to set that up, but it's not absolutely necessary, but the best rotations for munitions will have the Grim. And then to round that out, I'd like the Scrap just to kind of keep that momentum going with the supercharge, because the nice thing about the Gemini 200, every time you use it, you're getting that 5% extra might as well, which is going to be nice for that time period. And then if your choice is if you're running Big Gun as well, obviously you want the Scrap as well, just because it's going to be a 10,000 supercharge. But you have other options as well. You can run the solar for a bit extra might. I don't feel like it's absolutely necessary. I feel like the Scrap's important. You could also run the Dead King Scepter. That's more for single target. You could run the Stone, which I don't have because I didn't invest $200 to that artifact. But you could run the Stone as well. But definitely Gemini and Grim is going to be priorities as well. So in terms of the spec, once again, it's very typical. Super powered, critical attack damage, critical attack chance, max and might. Iconic powers, Robot Sidekick and New Venom Boost, nothing fancy there. Super speed, this is where this changes. In these guide series I'm doing, just a power set guide. I'm not going to be using super speed powers, because if you're flight or skimming or acrobats, that doesn't help you. So I'll tell you where in the video that I would use the super speed power, but I'm not going to be showing it in this guide series going forward. And then we've got the one-handed proc there just for your weapon. So in terms of loadouts, you have mini nuke, chain gun, multi-net launcher, and I'll get into the important parts you have to worry about here with the tap range and hold range. Explosion, robot sidekick, and new venom boost. Once again, you could use big gun. To me, it's more of a preference. If you go into a raid with 100% supercharge, start with big gun. Like say you're doing Shatter Gotham, start with big gun on the ads, and then switch into new venom boost. That's ideally what I do. I'm still not a fan of mounted turret compared to where I want new venom boost. Big gun, to me, it's so crit dependent. If you don't get a crit with big gun, it's absolute trash. And just my personal experience with munitions, I don't get enough crits with it, and I just like the consistency of Neo Venom Boost and being able to clip with it as well. So if you like big gun, 100% is a great supercharge, but it's very, very crit dependent. If you don't get a crit, terrible damage. The other thing, if you are super speed, just take out multi-net and put in Dervish. That's the only difference there. So if you're super speed, use Dervish, because that's going to be the highest, because Dervish is just cheese right now. But if you're not super speed, then use multi-net launcher. And we'll get into the breakdown of why in a moment. And then, I guess I should mention augments. Obviously, they're going to be pretty self-explanatory. You want the Might augments up top, and then the Might augments for Origin, Might adaptive. So let's get into the rotation here. Okay, so with the melee loadout here, so multi-net launcher, the hold range aspect of it, the multi-net retractor, this is the move that we're going to be focusing on, because it's a part of the rotation, and you need to be aware that it's going on, because you're clipping it each time, so you're not going to notice it. So basically what it is if I do multi-net retractor or multi-net pull, the first one, if I do a tap range, single target. So tap range, single target. If I do a hold range, it does another AoE shot. So hold range, same thing. So initial, hold range, and then that does it again. That's what you want to be doing in this melee rotation. Now you think the other thing as well to note is that multi-net retractor only hits the second move, only hits a maximum of 4 targets, no matter on your positioning. But the thing is, this doesn't matter. You would think why would you use that move? It doesn't hit everything because of how it splits. So if I use mini nuke right here on 8 targets there, we'll wait the 10 seconds for mini nuke's damage to show up. Okay, so 33,085 for mini nuke. So if I do multi-net retractor in the pull, once again, wait the 10 seconds for it to show up. 45,969. So despite mini nuke hitting all those targets, I hit with the retractor, even though technically, yeah, it's 2 moves, but you're clipping it, so it really only feels like 1 move. So even though mini nuke hit all those targets, because of the heavy splitting damage, it didn't matter, because my multi-net pull still hit those 4 targets. So yes, you're not hitting all the targets in front of you, but you're still doing 8 targets worth of damage to those 4 targets because of how the power split damage. So in terms of the rotation, you just have to be aware of each time I'm using multi-net launcher, I'm also doing the retractor on it. So every time you see I hit this power, do a hold range, and that's what I'm doing. You're not going to see it because it's clipped. So say if I do, pull, and same thing, I'm clipping it. So if I do it again, hold range, and I'm clipping it with explosion. So it comes at the same time. So that's why you have that speed, because you're putting in that extra hold range each time you're using that ability, just like you would like when I do single target and doing the tap range. So it's just important that you do it, because if you just do hold and then the next one, obviously it's do less damage because you're only getting 6 hits. But if I do this hold range and that, I'm getting all those extra powers in that same amount of time. So just something to be mindful of the rotation is that you're always doing that hold range. So let's kind of get into the actual rotation here so I can show you. Okay, so we had 46, but that's because the burning PI wasn't set up right away for mini nuke and chain gun. Then we had 50, dipped down to 47 with a low crit, 55, 43 because I ran out of power. So it's still a very power intensive rotation because mini nuke is still that 450 power cost. And then, like I said before, if you're super speed, you can just pop in dervish instead of multi-net launcher and get better results. But still, you know, between 50 and 55k at 47k might, it's not too bad considering the gear. You should have another like 3,000 might or so by the end of this gear. I think on test server I was like 50,000 might base, and then obviously in content you're going to have higher because of the extra 3% might and power. So it's still not a bad melee rotation, certainly lacking compared to what you'll see in precision side of this, but it still has some potential. If you're dervish, you can be consistently closer to 60k, but this you still have some options with without being super speed. Okay, for a single target, the loadout, it still revolves around the multi-net launcher, except this time we'll be doing the tap range. So like I said before, if we go back to targets here, if I do tap range, it's only single target. Tap range, single target. So that's what you're doing here. Now, same thing. If you're in a boss with ads, like say like Talon and Shatter Gotham, yeah, you'll still be doing, unless you want to do pure single target damage, you can still do the hold range on there to get hit the other targets. That is still the option available to you. But for pure single target, you'll be doing this here. So multi-net launcher, tap range, chain gun, and amplified heat vision. Just those 3 powers. That's all this loadout consists of, just rotating those 3 powers off cooldown. I have shrapnel on here just for something you can clip with a trinket to get some extra supercharge. That's your preference. You could run another like mini nuke if you want to do a little bit more damage on AoE. You could run that and clip that with trinkets, or in the rotation you could run a shield. But this single target rotation only revolves around these 3 powers. So let's get into the rotation here. Okay, we're back with a single target rotation. With that rotation there, I jumped to the second sparring target just because I think towards the end it was getting an issue with some of the hits not registering. As you can see, some of the ones had like 39 on it instead of the regular like 45. So because the sparring target was getting low on health, I'm just below the kind of might threshold. Like on test server, I'm just about like 49, 50k might on test server, and I can get consistent 30s, no problem. This one kind of fluctuates depending on the crits because of my might. So like 34, 29, 26, I think there was low crits, and that one this target was dying. Then back on the fresh target, it was 29, 30, 32. So it's definitely a very consistent rotation in the 30s, depending where your might is. And it's just rotating those 3 abilities. So basically, and like I said before, if it's going to be a melee part, instead of just doing the tap range, you just do hold range. If there's going to be adds on the boss fight as well, so like I say, like I was talking about before, like a Shatter Gotham, but it's still Munitions single target is still very, very viable. It's in that upper tier. Certainly not on the same level as like gadgets and nature and stuff like that, but it's certainly very viable. As you can see here, being almost consistently in the 30Ks. For range damage, Munitions actually isn't too bad. A lot of power sets, like say when you think of like gadgets, you know, really good melee damage, really good single target damage, and lackluster range damage. Like Rage, really, you know, awesome melee damage, you know, okay single target damage if you can melee, but really lackluster range. Same thing with like Earth. Earth is like really good melee, lackluster single target, lackluster range. But you know, range is for Munitions, it's great melee, great single target, and great range. So it's a really well-rounded power set. Munitions is probably one of the most well-rounded power sets currently in the game. So if you want to have it's just that it's a little bit boring to play because it's a little bit slower channels. But if you want a power set that's, you know, good at controlling, you know, good at all aspects of damage, where up close, range, or single target, Munitions always fits into that. So in terms of loadout here, so same thing, just like I talked before in the single target and the melee section, you do multi-launcher with a multi-net retractor. So even though the second hit only hits 4 targets, the way it splits damage still ends up coming out on top. And then you're going into mini nuke, chain gun, and rail guns. Rail guns is nice because this will go through targets. So it's more how you position yourself. But say it's kind of difficult here, the way it's positioned. But basically, if I do railguns and there's targets behind, it's going to keep going. So say there's like an ad set behind this ad set, because they're too close for it to really show here. But say there's an ad set behind this ad set, like say 2 feet away, 5 feet behind, or whatever, like in your raid. If you position yourself with railguns, you can actually hit the target through that, because railguns will keep going. You know, just like the movie Eraser with Arnold Schwarzenegger, that's what it's based off of. It keeps going through your targets, so that's nice from that aspect. Obviously, chain guns is a staple, and then mini nuke splits pretty well for range damage as well. But yeah, in terms of the rotation, it's going to be left to right, which we'll show you here. Okay, so you'll see a little bit of fluctuation depending on the parsers. It's just how the damage lined up, as you can see by the hit count. But, 48, 49, 46, 47, 46. Obviously the dips to 30, you can see the hit counter, so 183 to 147 is just how the parsers lined up because it's a 10-second parse. But as you can still see, pretty much especially at my might level 47k, 50k from range is a lot of damage that power sets can't do. Like, you're not going to see a lot of even gadgets range, water range, trying to think what other word, like obviously rage range, atomic range. You see a lot are not going to reach those levels with that type of might, just because munitions is so well rounded. So 50k might, 50k parse at 47k might is by no means a terrible parse at all for range. Munitions is very viable from range and being safe and elite and stuff like that. Okay, on to the precision side of munitions. Munitions prec was never a concept that was designed with the power set in mind. Back when this power was created during the AM days, that's why it's full of channels. It's full of like hardly any dot power. It's just the burning PI. So it's one of those power sets that doesn't really fall into having any useful abilities to help precision, like say like Ice has Snow Devil, like munitions and nothing like that. We don't have any dots like the other powers do, like a 12-second dot to at least put out. We don't have a power like turret that can jump clip. We don't have nice melee dots like Rage would with Prec. So it's just one of those powers that doesn't fit well with Prec. You can still Prec with it. It's just one of those power sets where you're just kind of filling in the blanks and making like a hodgepodge of a loadout, because you just have to find some abilities that work. The other thing you'll notice is this is a different scenery here, a different style. This is the test server. On live server, I fortified my precision artifacts because with the 200 increase, it wasn't viable for me to have both full Prec and full melee. So now I am, or melee. So now on test server going forward, because on test server I have some decent skill points now after farming on test, but just over 400. Obviously I can get any precision artifacts I want and be able to test those for you. I can have decent gear now because this is the war metal setup. So basically what it does is it allows me, now we have a generator base mod, so it allows me to give a more accurate representation of precision as opposed to live server, which is I'm always like half spec because I'm mainly might based. So going forward, my guides are going to be based on the test server for that. So let's kind of get into the rotations and specs here. Okay, so for the melee side of precision, melee has changed for Prec since the last game update, which is basically the refresher to all the weapon combos, which I'll show in a later video, which I can link here in the description when that's out. But now we're used to being, martial arts smoke bombing. That was the meta for a very long time since Stats revamp. Now it's kind of changed right now to something that you wouldn't expect, because it's not even a weapon mastery combo. So we'll kind of get into the spec here. So obviously it's going to be weapons expert specking, critical attack chance, critical attack damage, and maxing out your precision. In terms of iconic powers, you're going to want to take Neo Venom Boost and Robot Psychic. Sonic Crash, just a personal choice. Super Speed. This is one of the things where in my guides I'm not going to be showing you super speed rotations like everything in the past. Like, yeah, I could just clip with Dervish, I could cancel with Vortex Trap and do all that, just like you saw in my previous guides. I don't want to show that because then it's a super speed guide, and then if you're not super speed, like if you're flight or skimming or acrobats, you can't do that. So just like our other ones, you can still Prec if you cancel with Vortex Trap, cancel with Dervish, what have you, but that's not what I'll be showing in this guide. So super speed, you really only need to take the first innate. You can take speed drain if you want as lower supercharge, but it's not necessary. Neo Venom Boost is going to be the one to take for iconics. But if you're super speed, yes, I would take Vortex Trap, I would take Phase Dodge, and I would take even Dervish. So in terms of weapons, what we're going to be using is the two-handed. And the weapon mastery, this one is going to be for range, so don't just ignore that right now. So right now we're going to be doing the Doom Spin weapon combo, and that is not weapon mastery, that is just a plain weapon attack Doom Spin, which is your hold, tap twice, and hold again. So I can show you that here. So hold, tap, tap, hold. That's all it is. No weapon mastery, no charge bar, no nothing, and you'll see the results that produces. So basically that is what your best bet for melee precision or melee precision right now. That may change in the future. It's already been stated on the forums that the high damage that Doomspin is doing is intended. That may change or be altered in the future, but as of this video being released to you right now, this is going to be the highest practical parsing. Now, just as you saw there, yes, you're invulnerable to interrupt the entire time with Doomspin, but martial arts smoke bomb, you're vulnerable to block. Dervish, you're vulnerable to block. Every melee combo for precision is going to be vulnerable to block. But the nice thing about it is, since that there's no charge bar because it's weapon mastery, if you get blocked, you're not losing that massive end damage from weapon mastery. You get to still go right back into it. So it's one of those things where you have to get used to, know which ads are going to block, or and spin away from it. But it's one of those things where you would think it's not very practical because you're vulnerable to block. Well, so is everything else. It's just, that's how it is. So in terms of loadouts, actually we can go back into the gear, sorry. So obviously you get a blast adapter on two-handed. Neck mod's obviously going to be relentless precision. Back mod can either be berserker or accelerated killer instincts. I like the timing wise of having berserker because it gives me melee range, and accelerated KI and accelerated mini nuke don't work, which the timing, which I'll show you in a moment. Chest mod, core strength. Leg mod doesn't matter. Hand mod's going to be max damage. Trinkets, once again, doesn't really matter. On test server, I have the Shadow Bat. Obviously, you're going to want the DPS trinket, supply drop, and orbital. In terms of artifacts, you would think that I'm not using a weapon mastery combo that you can drop the Venomous Dispenser. Well, Venomous Dispenser still has a 5% prec artifact with 1,115 prec. So unless you're rocking like the stone at 200 to make up some of that prec, you'd lose 1% prec. But yes, if you have the stone at 200, you don't need the Venomist. Because it just won't be necessary, because the stone has the exact same base prec and it's only 1% prec drop, which isn't a huge thing, but then you get all the benefits of the stone. But it's not really realistic to have that, because it's most people don't have the stone before, so that's like a 1.7 mil experience investment to make just for that artifact. So maybe during a double weekend in the future or something, if you want to get your stone at 200, that's great, but I'm not expecting you guys to have this at 200. But yes, the way Doomspin is right now, you'd be better off going with the stone instead of the Venomous Dispenser, because it's not necessary unless you're doing range damage in the same time. But if you're strictly only melee, you don't need that, but you have to have the stone at 200. That's the thing. The Venomous Dispenser, you probably already have at 200 because it was a free artifact. So that's why I'm guessing you guys will all have that. But if you have the stone at 200, yes, you can drop that, but that's just, at that point, it's common sense. I don't have to tell you that. You're going to want the Grim for obviously the 5% prec at 200, or even at the 4% prec at 160. Also setting up the PI, so you don't have to worry about it. Munitions, which is the burning. And third artifact, you can go Sparring AI, but it's very, very unlikely, if ever, you're going to get a counter doing Doomspin melee. So you're not going to be able to proc this, unless you're much better off with Gemini to take advantage of the 5% prec that you'll get when you do Supercharge, like Neovenom. And then obviously in the head mod, you want Neovenom Boost 3 for that Supercharge. So ideally, those would be the 3 artifacts. The best artifacts will be the Stone, Grim, and Gemini. But once again, I'm not expecting you guys to have this at 200 already. So let's kind of get into the rotation here. Okay, so in terms of a loadout with munitions, it's based around mini nuke and killer instincts. Ideally, this is because of the timing. So with the Grim, you're going to have it set up the burning PI, so you're fine with that. You can use Explosion as well and Survival for a shield, just for another clipping move, to do a little bit extra damage. You could use Shrapnel Grenade Launcher if you wanted to, but it's basically focused around mini nuke and killer instincts and using the timing behind that. Other than that, it's just Robot Sidekick and Neovenom Boost, which is more like typical of a regular precision loadout. So what I mean by timing it in the rotation is that with Doomspin not being a weapon master, you can't really see the charge bar, so know when to cancel. So to line up what I find to be ideal for this and mini nuke being 6 seconds. So basically use mini nuke, hold, tap, tap, hold, and then you'll see when mini nuke comes off cooldown at the 6 seconds, that's when you want to go back into it. And then when it's off cooldown, that's when you hit it and go back into it. Mini nuke's going to be off 6 seconds. Hold, tap, tap, hold. And then KI is going to come up in a sec. Then going back into it. And yeah, you can mix in Explosion if you wanted, but just as an example there, we can kind of go back to what that was parsing. 56, 56, 68K. And obviously I stopped there. So obviously 70k for melee precision without a weapon mastery rotation obviously is quite an outlier. But that's kind of the basis of the rotation there. So we can kind of get into some more actual parses here. Alright, so that certainly gives the impression there. 70, 60, 57, 63, 67, and that's all at 29k prec, which is certainly reasonable for live server, I believe, because I know these artifacts are 200, but you know, there's no base precision on the Gemini. The Grim was already, it's just 1% extra. The Venom Wrist you would have at 200 anyway. My augments, yeah, those are 247, but my top augments are low. So 30k prec should easily be achievable on live server. I've got bit generator mods from the previous DLC on test server, so those numbers are accurate and realistic to what you're seeing. It's always going to be like, you know, an average of probably 60. With some parses, depending on what mini nuke is doing, be 70 or in the mid 60s, 63, 67, and that's all without an actual weapon mastery combo. So it's certainly, its viability is completely up to you. You're going to have to get used to what situations you're going to be vulnerable to block in, but the same situations that you were vulnerable to block could be the same things with smoke bomb, same thing with if you're using like a heavy dervish rotation. You know, they're all vulnerable to block the same way. But it's just that right now, this is certainly the new overparsing precision melee rotation. Okay, so in terms of single target with precision, nothing's changed, even with the weapon update. It's still a flurry shot. Flurry shot, it's a special case because there's no other weapon masteries that are purely single target. So you've got the dual tap, which is single target. Flurry shot's completely single target. No other weapon mastery has like complete single target component to it. It's always a mix of AoE, or you got to be like MA uppercut and melee or melee. But it's just one of those things where even if they'd have to heavily nerf flurry shot for it to be still subpar for a single target. So it's nerfed slightly. You can't get as high numbers, but you can still, it's still way, like much higher than everything else that's out there. So once again, in terms of spec, it's going to be the same thing: weapons expert, critical attack chance, critical attack damage, everything into prec, super speed. This where it's going to change slightly. If you're super speed right now, take tornado pull and take phase dodge. I'm not doing that because if you're flight or acrobats or skimming, that doesn't work for you. But if you're super speed muni prec, you want tornado pull and you want phase dodge. Iconic powers: robot psychic and neo venom boost, which is going to be, you know, standard for that. Weapons obviously standard as well. Max dual wield, and then take flurry shot and might as well take expulsion shot if you have to range AoE anyway. So in terms of loadouts for this, once again, if you super speed, you want to do tornado pull, clip with killer instincts, and then have phase dodge as well. So you can do all three of those powers and then just go up and have a shield or something to go back into it. But if you're not super speed, then you want to go laser net launcher, which is going to set up, which is purely single target, and since that's a little burning PI as well. Killer instincts obviously, and then if it's a boss fight with ads, like say Tala, then you want to take mini nuke and then just do mini nuke, clip with killer instincts instead of laser net launcher, and just depending on the fight. If there's boss and ads, clip with mini nuke. If there's just a boss or just a single target, clip with laser net launcher, and then you have a shield just because, and robot psychic and neo venom boost. Nice. Okay, as you can see, there's not really much of a drop off with Prec. 28, 26, 25. So if you're a precision player not named Obsidian, you can still get closer to 30Ks on Flurry Shot. I Flurry Shot maybe once a month just to make these videos. So obviously I suck now and sucked back then. But yeah, obviously nothing really drastically has changed with Flurry Shot. You can still do higher damage with Tornado Pull because Tornado Pull has a higher crit rate than anything else, higher base damage. So that instead of, I think the max crit Legion launcher was like 18, so Tornado Pull is going to be closer to 30k on that one on the crit, and you get the little burning dop or whatever, it doesn't matter. That's offset by the Grim and Sidekick damage. But once again, what you're doing with Munitions single target before this revamp, you're doing after. Nothing changes. Because Flurry Shot didn't change drastically enough. The other nice thing about having two-handed as your primary melee weapon is that you do have the option to spec into Aerostorm. Now, if you want to save the skill points, obviously melee you don't need to spec into Weapon Mastery, so you can save all the 3, 6, 9 skill points it would take for that. But if you want to, just like with Flurry Shot and Explosive Shot is still completely viable. It's still probably slightly higher than two-handed mastery, I believe, for Aerostorm. I think two-handed Aerostorm is slightly below it. But if you want to have a great melee, obviously because you'll be using Doomspin, if you want to spec Aerostorm, you still have a viable range combo. Or, you just go into dueled Explosive Shot, because you're going to need dueled anyway for the Flurry Shot for the single target. So it's up to you if you want to change armories, if you have to go range. But if you want to stick with a melee and a range armory in one, then it's going to be two-handed Aerostorm. So in terms of loadout, nothing really changes. You just drop Explosion, not like you really use Explosion anyway, but you can kind of mix it in. Same thing if you want to clip with a Trinket or clip with Survival. Same thing, but it's going to be Mini Nuke and Killer Instincts is still going to be your main clip. So just from range. It would help if I actually showed the parts as well for you. So let's restart this because get it proper. Okay, jump back in. So you kind of get the idea there. 40, 36 because that was a bit slower than 46. So even like 46k Prec from a range perspective, that's still perfectly viable. It's still going to be even better in some cases than Might base for range. So it's up to you. If you want to change your armories and do dual Explosive Shot and be slightly higher than that, be up my guest. But you're going to be melee anyway with Doomspin, or melee. But you want to be have a viable alternative for range in the same spec, it's going to be Aerostorm. Okay, for munitions controlling, it stays the same as my previous guide, but we'll kind of go into it again here. So in terms of the spec, always going to be hybrid. That's always how I play controller. Critical power chance, critical power magnitude. Now this differs slightly. I don't need any more power than I normally already have. Like obviously, as the artifacts increase, I'll get more power from them as my gear increases. 235 was kind of that sweet spot that I was at last DLC, where I didn't have an issue as long as you're rotating like a soda in your rotation. So I'm going to leave that at 235 because there's no point to waste 10 skill points into getting extra power that I don't necessarily need. So then I'm going to put those 10 extra skill points into VIT, which will matter in the long run. Iconic powers, you don't need to spec any iconic powers there. Super speed, I'm taking the restraint recoveries just because they give me a little bit of power back. If you don't have many skill points, you don't have to worry about that, but it's just all the power helps. In terms of weapons, hand blaster down to solar flame. In terms of loadouts, the same active protection system, survival, which will be your aggro dump, multi-net launcher, it's a heal debuff. Defense debuff is smoke grenade launcher. Attack debuff is the shrapnel, which is your supercharge generator. In terms of gear, Hand blasters with replenishing adapter. Head mods can have active protective system. Neck mods obviously replenishing procs. Back mod doesn't really matter. If you want to go pure control, you could do like accelerated survival, but since I have the OP back, you're going to split it between DPS and controller side. Chest mod's always going to be power efficiency. Leg mod, once again, doesn't matter. Hand mod's going to be max damage. Trinkets, ideally you want the summer vent trinket because it gives you a bit of power back. You could also run the Central City trinket, the controller trinket, supply drop and orbital, once again, it's your preference. You run around sidekick or something like that. In terms of artifacts, they stay the exact same. You want the Parasite Power Harness, you want the Scrap of the Soul Cloak, and the Amulet of Rao. Once again, these don't really need to be at 200. Scrap of the Soul Cloak, definitely have it at 200. But in terms of the Parasite Power Harness, this would help. But as you can see there, and as I covered in my controller video, 1,000,000 XP just for 1 extra % on power and 0.17 on bit precision. Not really that much of a difference. Same thing with the Rao. 40 to 50% seems like it's a lot, like a 10% stronger debuff. It's not. It's 1%. So right now I have a 14% attack and a defense debuff, and what's heal? I think it's like 35. Think so. But yeah, it just goes, instead of a 14% defense debuff, it's a 15%. It only goes up 1% for 1,000,000 XP. So once again, not absolutely completely necessary, but scrap is. And in terms of rotation, still the exact same as before. Solar Flame in between trinket rotation. So Solar Flame first clip, Solar Flame second clip, Solar Flame third clip, Solar Flame, and repeat. And that's the controller rotation there.